पकड़िए संभाल ले नहीं लास्ट बीच में भी संभाल मेरा स्टेज नहीं हुआ
Yes. Please.
Is it for the day?
Yes.
This is Alex Tom. Market credit. Grazia. I'm good.
Yesterday I confirmed something.
बताना पड़ेगा. You just write. Yeah.
Nandita Barbacia Foundation.
Oh, very nice to meet you.
Thank you for coming. It's been a pleasure.
It's a pleasure for me to come also. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Please come.
Okay.
ये आशीष का आशीष नहीं
सेंटर तो
Thank you. Dinesh started the part of this committee. Group that came in. TJP.
एक फिश बोल दे देना फिश
Gentlemen, kindly settle down. I am Priyadarshi Das from RIS. I think we are witnessing a very nice weather today, which makes the event even more timely to talk about energy in clean and green forms. I'm sure that all of you appreciate that this is a very vital topic to discuss in the South Asian region, because we have recognized the need for a smooth energy transition that should happen, if not overnight, at least a process should be initiated so that at some point of time we realize the benefits of this transition. So this is a one-day event which we call South Asia Green Energy Summit 2019. First of all, on behalf of the organizers, the Asia Foundation, RIS and the Australian Aid, we welcome all our guests and delegates for this conference, particularly the guests who have traveled from distant places in other regions to share their perspectives. So without wasting more time, I welcome all our distinguished guests for the inaugural session. Mrs. Nandita Barua, country representative in the Asia Foundation India office, Professor Sachin Chaturvedi, Director General, Research and Information System for Developing Countries, and we have Dr. Timothy Kendall, Counselor, Australian High Commission, and we are waiting for Sri Anand Kumar, Secretary, Minister of New and Renewable Energy, Government of India, to arrive anytime. So I now request Mrs. Nandita Barua to give her welcome remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dash. Good morning, everybody, and a very warm welcome to everybody, to all friends, delegates, colleagues from India and from the regional countries from South Asia. So it's really a pleasure and an honor to be here today to welcome this August gathering for the South Asia Green Energy Summit 2019. I'd like to first, of course, begin by acknowledging that this summit is a partnership and co-authored by RIS and the Asia Foundation together, with, of course, the support of the Australian Aid. And I think, as Professor Dash very aptly pointed out, the objective of this summit is for us to really look at, as a region and also as a country, what is it that we need to do better, stronger, and in a more coordinated way to make way for the clean energy transition. A lot of you might have returned from the COP recently, and I'm sure many of the issues that got discussed there would find some resonance here. Some of it which we may agree, some of it which may choose to be different. But I think the reason why we are holding this summit is really to look at three issues. And if you will look at your agenda, you'll find that there are three critical sessions that we are having. One is the understanding that for any technology or any change and transition to happen, financing is a key issue. And in the sphere of renewable energy, financing renewable energy really seems to be something that can move the ship really fast or slow it down, depending on how we choose to go about it. So one of the sessions, as you know today, will be on financial, which is the first session. The second one, of course, is the entire issue of unpacking policy challenges for the energy transition. And that session has had a lot of resonance and discourses, not just in this gathering today, but in various gatherings that relate to power that has happened in South Asia. For us, at this session, we are hoping that all of us together will really be able to move the discourse just beyond the needs and priorities of individual country, but to look at it as a regional agenda. What could be done differently and better at the policy space? What can be strengthened for us as a region to move together towards the clean energy transition? Last but not the least, is the innovation and technology part. And I think we are seeing a lot of innovation within the RE, whether it relates to innovation in technology for specific products, to larger innovations that lead to storage issues. And I think that all of you would agree that the entire energy transition debate remains incomplete unless we look at what storage options and innovations in that sector we are looking at. So the last session is going to look at innovations, not just related to specific products in renewable, but also to the larger issue of energy storage, and looking at things like pump hydro, the feasibility, the applicability, etc. So with all the 3 sessions, we have got an amazing set of speakers. We have tried to convene this by bringing together the private sector, public sector, academic, and the government. And we are really pleased that we have an extremely, extremely strong presence from all the 3 sectors, from countries in the region, from India, from Nepal, from Bangladesh. And I think it gives us an opportunity to really think through each other's priorities and needs and come to a common consensus. So with that, I think I'd again like to give you a very warm welcome to this summit. And I hope that the day's discussion are meaningful and that it leads to more concrete steps, not just as a one-time discussion through this summit, but things that we would like to move forward. So we would really like to also hear from our speakers and delegates about how do we move this discussion further so that it becomes a part of the larger policy discourse in our country and a part of the discourse of the development sector as well. I really want to thank RIS and Dr. Sachin Chaturvedi for giving leadership to this summit and for facilitating this, and everybody from the team of RIS. I also want to thank Australian DFAT and Tim Kendall, who is here today, for their support, which has been continuous, and colleagues, Mandakini, who is somewhere, for her presence. And I think it's our pleasure, again, to welcome you all. While we wait for the secretary, and I'm hoping that he'd be here shortly, I'd now like to turn to Dr. Sachin Chaturvedi to provide his remarks. Thank you.
Thanks, Nandita. Good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. I also would like to thank Asia Foundation for this partnership, and to Dr. Tim for our continued engagement in this extremely important area, as Nandita laid out, from COP25, which is still to be addressed. But before I get into that, let me at the outset mention how privileged we are in RIS to continue to focus on our work program on South Asia from various perspectives. And this is one area which we recently added to our portfolio of various activities. It basically began some 3 years back when we were approached by the Ministry of Finance to contribute and be part with them when India had to organize the annual board meeting of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. And at AIIB, when we were given various themes, there were some 7 themes which India focused on during the partnership with AIIB. I requested my colleague Shubhmoy Bhattacharjee to focus on renewable energy, and I'm very glad that this portfolio now is expanding. South Asia continues to be focused for RIS, not only from the days of SAARC, but also when we got engaged in envisaging and also getting the first think tank meeting organized in 1998. When BIMSTEC official meetings had yet to take place. So that was the kind of commitment and engagement of RIS. Fortunately, with the program that we launched in 1999, on Asian integration, our profile in terms of areas largely focusing on trade and investment also multiplied. And as a result, we could bring together a big network of think tanks from various South Asian countries, and we could put together SASEPS, which has multiplied its energies and has also contributed very effectively through the SAARC Eminent Persons report, which in 2006 gave a major plan for science technology cooperation among South Asian countries. It could also provide basis for SAFTA, and then eventually the agreement on services within the SAFTA framework. So this has given the ambit to many of the think tanks to come together and contribute in terms of what the areas that we think in the region are important. BIMSTEC has also given new energy to this, particularly from the point of view of cooperation between India and Bangladesh, that it has sort of intensified in several areas, including in energy, which earlier was not so emphatic in our bilateral partnership. Now it is one of the areas where with our Northeast Connect and Act East policy, The two are combining, and BIMSTEC is one of the beneficiaries that would be there. It is also very important to note how Bhutan and Bangladesh themselves are also exploring possibilities of energy cooperation among themselves. And this, I think, is adding to the larger effort that India is making in terms of getting various actors together for bringing in more gravitas to the partnerships that BIMSTEC is leading. There are also discussions in terms of how India, Myanmar would also bring in the energy dimension, and here the role of the multilateral agencies, regional leads that are being provided. India-Japan partnership from that perspective is extremely important when we are talking about connectivity, and connectivity not confined to physical connectivity alone, but also trying to bring in the dimensions of engagement that are there in our partnership with Myanmar. So when we talk about South Asia and when we talk about the Connect, RIS has been trying to bring in some of these dimensions in our work program that are extremely important. Friends, it is also important for us to see how the current policy frameworks are also facilitating the expansion of the footprint that we want, not carbon footprint, but how we are going to go forward in reducing those footprints that are emanating out of our development process. And from that point of view, when Prime Minister is talking about 5 trillion economy, Prime Minister is not failing in mentioning the quality of growth that we are looking at. So it's not just the quantum that is important, it is also the quality. And PM has on many occasions delineated various features that are there associated with the quality of economic growth that we are looking at. In fact, if you see the speech he delivered at the Osaka G20 summit, you would find greater reference to quality infrastructure on which, again, our engagement with Japan is trying to bring in what we are trying to do in Sri Lanka or even as part of the Connect with Africa, the focus on quality infrastructure, which is one of the key issues when we can come up with necessary support mechanisms without emanating more carbon. On energy, India has been sort of part of the global agreement on changing world's energy mix, and if you don't change the energy mix and we continue to use the kind of energy we are using today, we will be facing innumerable adverse consequences that are there, and therefore the clean energy, renewable energy, energy efficiency, demand side management, and elements that are associated with the new energy policies of the world are extremely important, and this is where the Connect is extremely important. In 2 years' time, India would also be hosting the G20 summit here in 2022, and as part of our preparatory work for that, as world is also moving ahead with the commitments and whatever time we are left with on SDGs, it is important that we bring out some of the dimensions of these engagements when we are thinking of the energy choices that we have. And it is also important here to get the details on new technologies, as Nandita very rightly alluded to it. And today we have a full session on technological choices that are there, particularly the challenges in terms of carbon capture, storage, and also energy storage that are important for renewable energy. And because, as you know, it is also time in terms of how we go forward on this storage challenge and bring in technological choices that are demanding our attention. It is also very important at times to remind ourselves of the 3 Rs which are important in terms of reducing, reusing, and recycling when COP25 could not deliver. And since yesterday, you would see a number of tweets right from the Secretary General onwards to come up with the frustration and disappointment from COP25. But I think if you look at the outcome, Madrid at least could give us some basis to go back to Glasgow for some optimism in terms of how the areas and dimensions of our engagement that are there are likely to be fulfilled in terms of taking us forward. And also I think though the targets that were identified could not be there, but I think are important in terms of providing the basis. The delegates, they also deferred until next year any kind of arrangement on rules of international carbon trading. Both Australia and Brazil have pointed out the loopholes that are there in the data and on the accounting frameworks for some of these trade-related issues. But I think it is also important for us to take cognizance of the Climate Change Performance Index, which was released just before the summit. And as you see, India has appeared at the 10th position in this, and the current levels of per capita emissions and energy use in India, they are ranked on the 9th position, which is a sort of a high category, and are still sort of comparatively low, and along with that ambition, 2030 agenda targets, the effort and the announcement by the Prime Minister in terms of our national commitments and our effort to reduce greenhouse gas is extremely important. We also find one important dimension in terms of what the chief negotiator from India, our telecom minister, also mentioned in terms of the idea of mobilizing around $100 billion for support and to bring in the heft that is required in the climate finance. And that, I think, is still a gray area for several countries where this requirement is huge. There are also discussions in terms of how the central banks can play an important role in mobilizing the climate finance, and this, I think, is important for countries where immediate transfer of those technologies is important. RIS has also initiated a new project with the Principal Scientific Advisor, PSA's office, on STI for SDGs, Science, Technology, Innovation for Sustainable Development Goals. And that project is likely to tell us the gap that we see across not only goals and targets, but across indicators, what kind of technology gap we have, and how some of that can be supported and leveraged through the idea of bringing in SDG well within the ambit of the countries to deliver. Within India, and I'm very glad that now Secretary has joined us. Warm welcome to you this morning. Secretary would, I'm sure, would elaborate what kind of new initiatives are there. But as we see in Uttar Pradesh, we see in Andhra Pradesh, new efforts have been made in terms of introducing projects which are extremely ambitious and are going to go in the direction of the India Smart Grid Forum, and that, I think, would be giving the heft. But some of the states, as we see in case of Rajasthan, the state with the highest solar power potential in the country has decided to levy an additional cess on all existing and future solar power projects. So some of those revenue mobilization efforts we have seen in the past, and I think those of us who are working on free trade agreements know pretty well how the revenue departments see the loss of revenue from withdrawal of the duties in the free trade agreements vis-a-vis the overall development priorities. So I think Secretary would further tell us about how some of these states which are coming up, because I see here from the figures, the idea of the Rajasthan government is to bring in projects which are from 2.5 lakhs to 5 lakhs under some kind of cess. and the tax holiday that was given has also been withdrawn. This is likely to increase project costs of the renewable power and tariff structures. So I think this is important for the day-long deliberations that we would have to factor in. As I said in the beginning, the idea of this meeting today is to bring in actors from South Asia together. I'm extremely glad that today we have been joined by almost all countries within the BIMSTEC network that we have, and they are going to deliberate on the dimensions of engagement, identifying priority areas of cooperation, and then I'm sure RIS and Asia Foundation would take it forward in terms of identifying where think tanks' roles are required further for deepening our work and identifying key priority areas to work further with MNRE. Now, without further ado, let me invite Dr. Timothy from the Australian High Commission to address us. And I once again very warmly welcome Secretary for joining us here. The Secretary would like to speak, so that's always possible. Please. So now I have pleasure in inviting Secretary MNRE, Mr. Arpan Kumar. Please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sachin Chaturvedi, Director General Research and Information Systems for Developing Countries. My apologies to the audience that I got late. In fact, I almost forgot about it. So let me admit that. And good morning, everyone. Ms. Nandita Barwa, Country Representative India, Asia Foundation. Dr. Timothy Candle, Economic Counselor, Australian High Commission. Dr. Chaturvedi. Dr. Rajan Mathai, our former Foreign Secretary. Distinguished guests from South Asian countries, ladies and gentlemen, friends from media. The first thing I would like to raise the issue, I was in COP21 just a couple of days back, and we all deliberated on the issue of reducing the carbon emissions, and we were trying to finalize the rule book, the COTOS rule book, and then ultimately deliberations happened, and there were a lot of differences there. But keep that aside, the formal consultations. And in fact, I was talking to my friends that ultimately, whose responsibility is there to fight climate change? Whether this responsibility is of global leaders, or is the responsibility of global entities like UN General Assembly or COP, or is it the responsibility of the individual nation, the community, the society, or every one of us? And the answer was very clear, that unless each one of us joins in this fight against the climate change, we would never be able to win it. We all have to start thinking that how to reduce the carbon footprint at our individual level, at our family level, at our society level. In fact, this issue I touched at COP also. Our Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi ji, for him, reducing the carbon intensity of the world and conservation of environment is not only a matter of commitment, but it's a matter of faith. And so should be for everyone in India and South Asia and world. On the sidelines of COP21, he very boldly declared that India would reduce its carbon emissions by 33 to 35% by 2030, considering 2005 levels. He also stated that by 2030 we would have at least 40% of our installed capacity of electricity coming through non-fossil fuels. And towards that aim, he also set a target of installing 175 gigawatt of RE capacity by 2022. When he spoke from the ambience of Red Fort about use of single plastic, that was a huge step towards environment conservation and reduction of carbon footprint. But after that announcement, my question to everyone in the country is that how many of us have taken that statement seriously? How many of us have started taking the cloth back to the market and saying that I will not use the plastic bag? How many of us have started buying a lesser shirt or a lesser set of clothes just to reduce the carbon footprint? How many of us have started cooking a lesser meal at home to reduce the consumption of gas? Or how many of us have started segregating wastes in our individual homes? Not many. I would like to urge that let's ponder upon this issue of environmental conservation and reduction of carbon intensity at our individual level, at our family level, and take those small steps where we can contribute effectively. Friends, as we talk today, in the world we have around 3,200 or 3,300 gigawatt of our capacity of renewable energy installed. Of this, half comes from hydro, around 460, 480 comes from solar, and 560, 565 comes from wind, and then biomass, thermal, etc., etc. Not thermal, but geothermal, and small hydro, etc. Renewable energy can reduce the emissions very significantly. And once we install 175 gigawatt of RE capacity, we would be reducing approximately 325 million tons of carbon dioxide, which is by no means a very small reduction. Out of 175, we have already installed 83 gigawatts. Another 30 gigawatt is under various stages of installation. Another 40 gigawatt is under various stages of bidding. We have just 22 gigawatt more to bid, and we still have clear 3 years to go. That is the year 2020, 2021, and 2022. So India would definitely achieve this target of 175 gigawatt, and in fact, we would exceed this target. And if we include large hydro, which is also renewable, then this figure would go up to 225 gigawatt by 2022. During the recent climate summit, the Honorable Prime Minister of India stated that we are not going to stop at 175 gigawatt, but we are going to go up to 450 gigawatt by 2030. And this is at least 450 gigawatt. And if we add another 50 gigawatt of large hydro, 55 gigawatt of large hydro, perhaps it would be around 65 gigawatt in my personal assessment by 2030. So we would be touching a figure of 510 and a little more of renewable energy by 2030, which should be not 40% or around, which will be around 60% plus of demand of the installed capacity in 2030. So what we have promised to the world that we will install a capacity of 40% of, at least 40% of the total electric capacity by 2030 in India, we would, and I particularly personally feel that we would be exceeding that by another 20 gigawatt, and we will have 60% of our total electric capacity coming through the renewables. Renewables has challenges. All of us have got stress assets, the coal assets, and there's a cost to it. But there's no cost which is more than saving the environment. Even if some of the states are saying that, yes, we are buying renewable energy at an excessive cost, then the conventional power, I would say that as a country, as a responsible citizen, as a responsible society, we must meet the cost. But let me hasten to add that we used to buy electricity at the rate of around, renewable energy at the rate of around 18 rupees or maybe at 18 cents around 10 years back. But today, it is not only that a matter of faith or commitment, but today buying renewable energy is becoming a issue of commercial sense, because the solar and wind, we are now getting at around 3 cents. 3 cents and 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour, and which is now getting cheaper than the conventional energy. And today, if you allow open access to happen liberally, and if you allow the captive power to be installed, take it from me that 99.9% of commercial institutions and other organizations will go for open access entirely. Because in our country, the tariff across various segments have not been rationalized. We give subsidy to the residential sector, we give subsidy to the farm sector, but at whose cost? We cross-subsidize through the commercial ventures and other organizations. And if this cost subsidy was not there, then even for the rooftop solar in the residential sector and the farm sector, it would be making a sense. We have recently, to catalyze rooftop sector, made the DISCOMs as a partners. We are giving incentives to the DISCOMs for installing rooftop projects. In fact, in the recent scheme, we have aimed more at the smaller households, and we are giving subsidy at the rate of around 40% for consumption, for installing 3 kilowatt project of the solar. And between 3 kilowatt to 10 kilowatt, the rate of subsidy is around 20%. And if we combine, it will be around between 0 to 30, by somebody is putting around 10 kilowatt, it would be approximately around 30%, which the subsidy comes. And beyond 10 kilowatt, why we are not giving subsidy? Because it is making a commercial sense. And you get a repay back maybe around 5 to 6 years, 4 to 5 to 6 years. In future, solar is going to lead the way. And solar is going to lead the way because efficiency of solar cells is going up, because the cost of solar cells and modules is coming down, and because the sun is omnipresent. The wind, the problem is that wind is available in certain parts of the world and certain hours of the day. So wind would keep on playing a complementary, supplementary role, but solar would lead the way. And I'll tell you why I'm talking about solar later. When we talked about around 3,300 gigawatt of renewable energy capacity as we speak today, the figures would say 3,200, 3,264, but I'm rounding out the figure because a little more is capacity more have been installed as we are, because the figures are available of 2018. By 2024, as per an estimate of IEA, world will install another 1,200 gigawatt of RE capacity. And of this 1,200, 60% would come from solar. And rest, for the reasons which I earlier stated. And then the wind, biomass, and the hydro. Solar, the advantage is not only that we have produced electricity, we also capture the heat, and which is very essential part of green energy. And this heat can be used for cooling purposes, for drying purposes, for cooking purposes. And also it has got huge industrial applications. So we, as a society, we as country, we as DISCOMs, we as planners, when you talk about green energy, we should not only talk about electricity. We should also talk about the heat capture, and which would be a very, very effective way to reduce the consumption of the fossil fuels and enhance the use and capture of green energy. In India, in Sai Baba's ashram, in Brahma Kumari's ashram, I think this is perhaps the world's largest or second largest cooking system, mass cooking system installed. And I would request my friends from South Asia to go and see those mass cooking projects. In our remote areas, we have started supplying the solar dryers, and we have supplied around, initially we supplied around 20 dryers, and now we're going to supply around 800 dryers in the area of Jammu and Kashmir. And the advantage of solar drying is, because we capture solar energy, solar heat straight, so you don't require any grid, one. Number two, solar drying is faster. Number three, solar drying is hygienic. And number four, the by solar drying, the farmer gets a better income. So my request to all our friends from South Asia is that when we plan for green energy, let's plan for green electricity and the green heat. We talked about the urban sector, we talked about the rooftop projects, but we should not forget about the farm sector. In India, I'm giving you the Indian example, and then I'll see that how we can get together as South Asian countries to help each other. We have launched recently PM Kusum scheme, which is Kisan Urja Suraksha Evam Utthan Mahabhiyan. This is The scheme is aimed at increasing farmers' energy independence and income. Besides having the prime focus on de-dieselization of the farm sector. So under this scheme, we are supplying 1.75 million pumps, standalone solar pumps to the farmers. And with these pumps, farmers won't have to depend on the grid for watering their fields. Through these pumps, farmer would become energy independent, and he would save on the cost of diesel. In addition, we are going to solarize 1 million pumps which are grid connected today, and we are encouraging farmers to set up small RE projects, maybe wind or solar, on their barren lands. So if a farmer is getting nothing out of the barren land, they would be able to get at least 50,000 to 100,000 Indian rupees by doing the solar farming. So in planning, we are looking after the urban sector, we are looking after the farm sector. And we are also looking after reducing the carbon intensity of our country and the world per se. Let me touch something on the tariff. We all get tariff at around 3 cents, 3.5 cents all across the world, depending on the solar insolation and good quality of wind. There are two models. In India, renewable energy sector is largely driven by the private sector investment. By installing 83 gigawatt, we have been able to invite approximately $100 billion investment in the country. And for the rest of capacity, which is now under installation, or would be installed, or which is under bid, or which should be bid, we would be requiring another additional $100 billion installed. So for 175 gigawatt, this capacity would come with an investment of $200 billion investment. Nothing from the government. Because we ask the vendor to give us a rate at which we buy the electricity, but then he arranges for land, he arranges for the project, he arranges for the capital, and he arranges for operations and maintenance. So going green is the easiest way today to serve and provide universal energy access to our citizens and people and the have-nots of the world. Because in India, everybody knows that we are doing this way, but since it's the South Asia Green Energy Conference, I thought I must touch upon that. Our solar sector is powered by one of our neighbors when you talk about the equipment, etc. I'll just close in another 2-3 minutes, sorry. We wanted to introduce manufacturing here in India. But if I had to give subsidy for manufacturing of solar cells and modules, a 5 gigawatt capacity would cost me around 3,500 crores. But do I take this money from the government? Or I find a way to socialize this cost? So what we in the ministry thought, that since it would be difficult to get this amount of sum from the government, why don't we socialize the cost and build in the subsidy in the tariff? And I am happy to inform you that we have been able to get a bid of 2.5 gigawatt of manufacturing of solar cells and modules in the country, building in the subsidy in the tariff, and that tariff is 2.92 rupees per kilowatt hour. So installing green energy capacity, installing manufacturing capacity can be done in a way socializing the cost without putting an additional burden to the government, my friends. So my friends from the South Asian countries may have a look at this option. And in case you require any help from us on this account, we would be very happy to provide you. India has started this initiative along with the cooperation of France, International Solar Alliance. We have 83 members as on today. And during the first assembly, India moved a resolution to increase the membership scope of this wonderful initiative. Initially, this initiative was to be restricted to 121 countries between the tropics, but then we thought that it should be a global initiative, and we moved a resolution that it should be open to all the members of the United Nations. And that amendment was adopted by the first Assembly of International Solar Alliance. 16 countries have already ratified this amendment, and we hope by the next assembly we would have ratification of all 30 countries which we require for making this initiative universal. And then everyone across the country can be part of this significant International Solar Alliance initiative and can benefit from this institution for development, deployment of solar energy. Our Honorable Prime Minister spoke about one sun, one world, one grid. Sun never sets on the earth. It rises somewhere, it sets somewhere. Every difference of 15-degree longitude can assist 1 hour of storage. The Middle East countries can help India in meeting its peak demand. Because when the sun is setting here, it is still shining in the Middle East. And we can help our Southeast nations and South Asian and Southeast nations in meeting their peaks. So we should have at least one grid serving South Asia. We should have one grid serving the Southeast Asian countries, and we should also connect to technical feasibility we are working it out with the Middle East nations so that we can help each other meeting our peak demands and reduce our expenditure on storage. So friends, we have to grow together. And as I said earlier, we have to make our individual commitments. We have to make commitments at our family level. We have to make commitment at our society level. We'll have to make commitment at our national level, at regional level, and global level. And if we do this, then only we'll be able to contribute effectively for reducing the carbon intensity, reducing the carbon footprint, fighting against the global warming, fighting against the climate change, and adoption of green energy. I'm sorry I took a little longer than that, what I should have, but this is a subject of passion, and I come from Kerala, where Dr. Rajan Mathai also comes, and we say that once you hold a mic, then never leave it. Thank you very much, and have a good day.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Secretary, for very insightful and very substantive comments. Let me now invite Dr. Timothy.
Thank you, Sachin, and thank you, Nandita and the Asia Foundation, but also Professor Chakravarty from RIS for bringing us all together today. I'd like to acknowledge the Honourable Secretary, former Foreign Secretary and other excellencies in the room. So what I was going to do is just talk briefly about rising energy demand in South Asia, talk a little bit about what needs to be done and specifically what the role of government is here. But I do note that the Secretary made some very powerful comments about both personal responsibility but also the need to work collaboratively. So I think they are things we need to remember when we consider the role of government. Then I'll talk a little bit about what the Australian government is doing in the region. So I think most people in the room would know that energy demand is growing rapidly across South Asia, and it is likely to continue with population growth, increasing wealth and consumption patterns, and also the movement of manufacturing into the region. India's demand for energy alone is likely to outpace domestic supply, and India will likely contribute somewhere around 30% of global energy demand out to 2035. Last year, the Australian government published a major report on the economic relationship between Australia and India, and it was titled The India Economic Strategy. There's a chapter in that publication that looks at energy and resources, and it has quite a bit of modelling that talks about the rising Indian energy demand and the way that Australia can work more closely with India to support that. So I'd recommend that to you, but I won't go into detail about that now. I think the other thing that we can largely be in agreement about is that while traditional energy sources will continue to contribute to powering homes and businesses, the size of India's population means that developing clean, renewable energy is crucial not just for India but also the region. The Secretary referred to the importance that PM Modi places on the use of renewable energy, and he referred to it as a matter of faith. And I think that that applies both to his reduction targets but also his renewable energy uptake targets. And certainly his commitment to the use of the single use of plastics. As India does move towards its ambition of becoming a $5 trillion US dollar economy, I think it is something to remember that we need to talk about the quality and the greenness of that growth. More broadly, outside India and looking globally, we know that the adoption of renewable energies is increasing quite substantially. And the World Economic Forum now has indicated that the world now generates about a third of its global power capacity through renewables. And the impact of this is an emerging energy market transformation. And it's very welcome at a time when policymakers and citizens are trying to deal with the emerging threats of climate change and when we're looking to reduce global emissions. And I think the other takeaway that we can draw from this is that it's likely to fundamentally change the nature of energy supply. So while these are all very positive movements, I think it's clear that there's a lot more that can be done, and that there are lots of challenges that face the renewable sector. There are certain policy and I think implementation challenges that are constraining the pace of transition, and these include power pricing, purchasing and power trading constraints, both internal and across borders, the intermittency of supply and access to finance. And many regulatory and market constraints also exist. And it's up to forums like this and people in the room here today to look at ways of addressing these constraints because financing and infrastructure alone can't do that. So what role, therefore, can government play? We've talked a little bit about the importance of this to the government of India, but I think more generally, governments across the world can look to encourage investment into new technologies, They can create incentives to develop and foster new industries and reduce national barriers, allowing for the creation of regional solutions. But part of this is also about working collaboratively and multilaterally. And there are lots of opportunities where we can, I think, improve the way that we share the burden and share both financing, resources and technology to improve our outputs. So in terms of Australia's commitment to energy security in the region, the Secretary mentioned the International Solar Alliance, and we're very pleased to be a ratified member of the ISA, and we were one of the first countries to become involved. I think it was last March 2018, we had our Governor-General out here for the first General Assembly, and we